Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. Today we're going to learn about an attitude of gratitude. This is a critical foundation of Jewish spirituality, which is to be able to recognize where we come from. You know, a lot of people live their lives with a bias towards, it's like a bias towards entitlement, an entitlement bias. I deserve it. And if you don't give it to me, then I'm all mad. In other words, they'll live a life of plenty. They'll have happiness and joy, and they're not grateful to anybody. It's only when they have a crisis, a bankruptcy, a divorce, an illness, a death, that suddenly they remember God. Can you imagine living life like that?
Anything bad is somebody else's fault.
It's always somebody else's fault. Anything good is my greatness. Anything bad is somebody else's fault. It's a very sad existence with this entitlement bias. But right at the very beginning, as the Jewish people are coming out of Egypt, entering into the promised land, in today's Torah portion, we're introduced to the mindset of gratitude. What the Jewish people needed to do upon entry into the promised land is that they needed to dedicate the first fruits, called the bikurim, as a gift to God. They would take from the 7 fruits of the land of Israel. What are the 7 fruits of the land of Israel? Wheat and barley, figs, dates, pomegranates, grapes, and olives. Right? We covered them all? Right? Those are the 7 fruits of the land of Israel, the 7 fruits with which the land of Israel has been uniquely blessed. And if you're a farmer in the land of Israel and you grow any of those fruits, you got to take the first of those fruits, put them in a special, beautiful basket. There's a certain way to stack them, to put the softer ones on top and the harder ones on the bottom. And then you go out in a procession towards Jerusalem with the more the merrier. An ox, they would coat his horns with gold. Is that nice? Gold horned ox. And the people would gather from the various villages, towns, hamlets, and cities along the way, and they would become a multitude of procession that would arrive towards Jerusalem. The priest would come out and greet them, and they would come with song and with fanfare, with joy and gratitude, and each one would make the following declaration that we're about to read. I'm going to read it to you in the Torah, and this was then given to the priest, who would eat it in a state of sanctity. This was considered holy food. It's good to be the Kohen.
So this is not sacrificing it.
No, so it's given to the Kohen, to the priest, to consume. Hi, Hendrik from the Netherlands. Nice to see you. Okay, so let's see what the Torah tells us about this process. It's quite a declaration. I'm just going to read it to you in the original. When you enter the land, the God your God is giving you as an inheritance, you must take possession of it by conquering it from its present inhabitants, and then divide it amongst your tribes and settle it. We don't conquer halfway. You win a war all the way, right? Now, you must take the first specimen of the 7 species of all the fruit of the earth, which you must then bring an offering from your land that God your God is giving you. You must place these fruits in a basket and take it to the place with you, which God your God will choose to rest his name. You're not sending this FedEx. You're not sending a DHL. You're bringing it by hand. It's delivery by hand, right? All right. So, folks, we were talking about an entitlement bias, which is such a miserable way of living life. It's just awful. You know, living with everybody owes me something. It's just a recipe for misery. Why would you want that? I made a decision very, very, very very long ago in my life that I would lower my expectations and increase my appreciation. To which point, everything's great. Like, really? You actually fulfilled your promise? That's amazing. I can't believe it. I'm in shock. Right? What?
You haven't been challenged enough yet. Your expectations can be lower than lower.
Yeah, whatever. Okay. So anyway, he's alive. All right, let's talk about. Thank you, Wandering Nomad. I appreciate it. Thank you all for sticking with me even through the darkness. It's another theme. This is Torah portion, by the way. It's another theme. It's very interesting. I don't think what happened was by mistake. Because another major theme of the Torah portion this week is that there's a plethora of awful curses. Awful curses. It's very, very miserable. It's very sad. You don't even honor anybody with an aliyah this Shabbos. You don't honor anybody with an aliyah that Shabbos. Whoever's reading the Torah just assumes the aliyah. because it's very, very dark. But we read last week's Torah portion. Vayafech Hashem Elokecha l'chos ha'klala livracha, and Hashem, your God, transformed the curse into blessing. The way Chassidus teaches this is that darkness is essentially hidden light. It's the intensity of light. So when we were experiencing the darkness in the past few moments, it was just a temporary state. It was not a new reality. It, in fact, has got to lead to deeper depth and clarity. So let's keep on going. So we're talking about the Torah portion this week, which is talking about Parshas Ki Savo. It tells us when you enter the promised land, you've got to bring the first fruits by yourself. We were just talking about the FedEx packages that would have accumulated at the door of the Holy Temple. Can you imagine? It would have looked like a warehouse over there. No, we don't do packages to the temple. You have to bring them by hand. It's called the pilgrimage festivals, 3 times a year. In addition to the bikurim, well, the bikurim is one of the festivals because you bring it in a time which is same as the festivals. Now, what do you do when you finally have this group of when you have your syndicate bringing the first fruits? You must approach the priest who will then be in office in those days and say to him, I'm not ungrateful to God. I declare today, only once a year you can do this, to God your God, that I've come to the land that God swore to our forefathers to give us. So the first thing he says is, I'm grateful to even live in this land. This land is my land. God gave this land to me. That's what he's saying, right? Where do you think they got it from? Right? They got it from this Torah portion, right? Somebody came up to me last night at the event here and said, in Exodus, the chorus, the song in Exodus, right? It was written by a non-Jew, Paul something. God gave this land to me. And I'm like, okay. That's in the Bible. That's where it comes from, It's nice that the Gentile, says the same thing, but it comes from the Torah, right? Anyways, it's the promised land. Remember, folks, there's only one country in the entire world that is called the promised land. There is no other country in the world that is promised. Every other country is conquered by the victor. Only the land of Israel is promised by the manufacturer, by the CEO, by the boss himself. You cannot possibly colonize your own home unless you're such a fool and so weak that you actually would believe the squatters' accusations against you. Okay, so, no politics. Well, there's no politics. This is existential. Anyways, so the priest will take the basket from your hands and move it together with you in the 4 lateral directions and up and down before the altar of God your God. You must then raise your voice as you recount God's kindnesses, contrasting our previous periods of settlement which proved precarious with our present secured settlement in the land. And here's the declaration. Specifically, you must pronounce the following declaration before God your God. An Aramean sought to be the destroyer of my forefather. Who was this Aramean? Lavan. Lavan was the father-in-law of Jacob. He sought to uproot him, referring to how Jacob, after living 20 years in Aram, had to flee his father-in-law Lavan, who intended to kill him and his whole family, but was prevented by God from doing so. Still referring to Jacob, we continue the declaration. He went down to Egypt and he sojourned there with his family, which was then only a small number of people. It was Jacob, he only had 4 wives and his 12 children, right? A small number of people, and he became a great, mighty, and populous nation there. Yet, although we lived in the land for 210 years, which land? Egypt. The Egyptians treated us cruelly, afflicted us, and imposed harsh labor upon us. So we cried out to God, our God, God of our forefathers, and God heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And God took us out from Egypt with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, with great awe, and with signs and marvels. Can you imagine you verbalizing all this? It's awesome, right? And he brought us to this place, referring to the temple to which you now have come, in order to show your appreciation to God for having given us gifts and gave us this land, the land flowing with milk and honey. Addressing God directly, you continue, now behold, in recognition of your kindness in giving us this land, I've brought this first fruit of the land, the first fruit of the soil, that you, God, have given me. After finishing this declaration, you must move the basket in the 4 lateral directions, up and down as well, before God your God, this time by yourself, and you prostrate yourself before God your God. This is quite a ceremony, hey? Right?
Everybody does this.
Every farmer. What?
Think of how many people are doing it. That's what I'm saying. A million people.
Yeah, the farmers, they're all doing it. Yeah. So the obligation to recite this declaration applies only when you bring your first fruits to the temple between Shavuos and Sukkot. So it's only summer, right? Shavuos is in like May, June, and Sukkot is coming up in a month, right? a month from today. You will then be rejoicing over over the good that God your God has granted you and your household. If ever you bring your first fruits later, you should simply move the basket as prescribed and give it to the priest without the declaration. The obligation to bring first fruits applies equally to you, to the Levite, should he plant, and to the convert who is amongst you. But a convert, no matter when he brings his first fruits, does not recite the declaration, since he is not a descendant of Jacob. Now, that was quite an interesting declaration you did there. I mean, imagine you walked into your house once a month for dinner, and you said, the year was 52 years ago when I was struggling in college, and I was lost and struggling with all sorts of early childhood traumas and the struggles of my parents and so on and so forth. And then God, my God, sent me my soulmate, and behold, she has carried me and helped me throughout the years. She has cooked for me and cleaned for me, to quote Golda from Fiddler on the Roof. She has carried me and bore me children, and tonight she has cooked me this dinner as well. Can you imagine? I think she might appreciate that, right? It's quite an appreciation. I think the first thing we learn from here is the importance of verbalizing. The importance of verbalizing your feelings. You know, do the people that you love know that you love them? They do? Sure.
Absolutely.
Do your kids know how you feel about them?
Yeah, every day. Absolutely.
You tell them.
Show them.
Is there somebody that you appreciate that is not aware of that?
Say that again.
Is there somebody that you appreciate and you value that does not know about it? There probably is. This is talking about the importance. This is the importance of verbal affirmation, because you know when you verbally affirm something, not only does it assist the listener, but even more importantly, it nurtures the emotions of the speaker. When you are able to verbalize your emotions, you are flaming the emotion within yourself. You're stoking the fire. I was talking to one of my kids the other night. He was very upset about something, a new rule in his school, and he was just talking for an hour about it. At the end of the hour of venting, I said to him, "No, so you feel better?" He said to me, "A little bit, but I understand the problem better. I understand what I don't like and what I'm okay with even better," because he was able to verbalize it, to talk it through, right? When you're able to, if you're angry with something, with someone, you should not do? You should not talk about it. Because if you talk about it, it's going to flame within you, right? And when you are experiencing positive emotions, you should talk, because when you talk about them, whatever you talk about is going to erupt in a far greater scale within you. Anyways, there's a big debate within the Talmud about when you're supposed to bring these first fruits. When you bring them. Is it immediately upon entry into the promised land, or was it only after the 14-year war that it took them to conquer the land? What do you say?
Yeah.
After. Toby says after. Anybody else? Any other opinions, dissenting views? So there's a debate in the Talmud about when the first fruits were obligated. I mean, the people needed to eat upon entry, right? So when you pick the pomegranate, did you first bring the pomegranate to the holy temple? Remember, they hadn't built the whole permanent temple, but they had the Mishkan, right? And I like to use the Hebrew word. They had the Mishkan, which was the portable shul, right? The portable temple that they traveled with. So that's the big question. The Rebbe explains that every debate in Torah is not right versus wrong, but right versus right. Eilu va'eilu, divrei Elokim chai. Both these and those are the words of the living God. Both sides of the debate are actually correct. There's only one of them which practically manifests. But when the Torah records two different opinions, it's because both of them are actually, in fact, aligned with Torah values, right? So what does it mean here that we have to bring the first fruits either upon immediate access into the land or only after conquest of the land? It depends on whether this happened at the beginning of our gratitude or at the end of our gratitude. I mean, think about it. Now, when you have uncontested real estate, which is after the conquest, or is it by just the beginning of my gratitude? I'm glad to be alive. I'm glad to be here right now on this day in this place. And even though I've got other problems to deal with, I'm still able to compartmentalize my gratitude, right? On a very personal level, how do we bring these first fruits today? don't have a temple to go to Jerusalem. What do we do? The Rabbi explains that when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing that we do? Modeh, which is gratitude. I am grateful. I'm thankful to you, O living and eternal King, that you have compassionately or mercifully restored my soul within me. Great is your trust in me. Right? That's what we say. Modeh ani lefanecha. It's in the first words in the prayer book. And if you don't say it yet, I encourage you to open for page 1 of the prayer book, the first Hebrew words of the prayer book, and you wake up in the morning, you're like this. Sit up in your bed and you say Modeh ani lefanecha. I encourage you to memorize these words, to print them out and put them next to your bed so you can start your day with an attitude of gratitude. This is the first opinion, which says that they said it not upon conquest, but upon entry. That's the Modeh ani. But then there's another opinion that says only upon conquest. When is that? That would be after you've had your coffee, after you've already checked some email, or maybe not checked your email. You shouldn't check your email before davening. But when you wake up in the morning, you've had your coffee, you've already done a little exercise, you've studied some Torah, you've already meditated, right? You've already meditated. You know that before you daven, you're supposed to meditate and reflect deeply on some Torah wisdom. And now you're conscious. You're not just awake. You're actually spiritually conscious. And now when you start davening, you say, to quote Phil, you say, Hodu. How do you say? I don't know how you say it. He says his tone of voice. Hodu. Hodu, which means gratitude. Hodu Lashem Kitov, which is the opening words of the morning service, is thank God for it is good. That's what it means. But it's a different part of gratitude. There's the gratitude you wake up in the morning, paralleling the access into the land. And then there's the gratitude we show in davening, in the beginning of davening, which is thanking God once you already found your balance, once you're already stabilized. Both of these are correct. Yeah?
My first gratitude when I wake up
is
gratitude that I woke up.
That's right. That's the first one. So you were the first opinion.
Literally, literally, no doubt.
Yeah.
I think if the purpose is to thank God and the focus is on God, then it seems to me it should not be conditioned upon either the 14 years or having a cup of coffee or watching the news or studying Torah. What's the emphasis? Is it on the individual whose purpose is to say thank you, essentially, or is the focus on God himself? And if it's God himself, it should not be subject to conditions precedent.
Well, you're speaking like a lawyer. You're speaking like a lawyer because in terms of human emotion, there are many people that refuse to be happy until they have full success. Right? And if there's some imperfection in their lives, you talk to them and say, aren't you, you must be such a happy person. You have a wife, you have kids. Yeah, but what about this lawsuit? Yeah, but what about this war? You're like, dude, relax. Focus on the good that you already have, right? So essentially you're correct too, that it should be about God. And it should be about lowering your expectations and increasing and heightening your appreciation. But a lot of people live with what we called before you walked in here, an entitlement bias. Right? You see what I'm saying? There's an entitlement bias. Now, these two opinions, I just want to point out, are very, very interesting that we read them every year on this Shabbos, because this Shabbos is typically the Shabbos that we encounter the 18th of Elul. And the 18th of the day of the month of Elul, today's the 15th of Elul, but in 3 days' time it's the 18th of Elul, is a very special day in the Hasidic calendar because it's the birthday of two giants in Jewish history. The first one was in the year 1698. On the 18th of Elul, it's 12 days before Rosh Hashanah, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. And 47 years later, it was the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad movement. So the Baal Shem Tov is the founder of the Hasidic movement. In 1698, he was born on this day, 18th of Elul. 47 years later, on the same day, the Alter Rebbe was born. He founded the Chabad movement. What's the difference between the two movements? The Hasidic movement was a revolution at its time, countering the establishment of Judaism. At that time, there was a huge schism. In Judaism, there were the scholars and the simpletons, and they would not mingle. The scholars were venerated. The simpletons were scorned upon, and there was nothing you could do about it. Came the Baal Shem Tov of the Hasidic approach, and he taught that every Jew is precious. Every Jew is the soul, a piece of God. Every Jew deserves and yearns to nurture that organic connection that he has with God. Nothing happens by chance. Everything happens for a reason. If you're a tailor or if you're illiterate, it's meant to be that way. And celebrate who you are instead of feeling miserable your whole entire life. These are founding principles of the Hasidic movement. But then, 47 years later, when the Baal Shem Tov passed away, he was succeeded by the Maggid of Mezrich, who then subsequently was succeeded by many different students who opened up their own Hasidic brands. You've heard of the Satmar Hasidim and the Breslov Hasidim and the Gerer Hasidim and the Vishnitz Hasidim and the Rachmas Trivka Hasidim. There's many, many Hasidim pending really their locales. Wherever they lived, that's where each one of these students developed their own following, which was named after the location. Chabad was pretty much all of Russia because the Alter Rebbe had a brand of Hasidus which was different to his peers. It was not an emotional brand of Judaism, of Hasidism, which would have been a continuity of the Baal Shem Tov. It was actually a brand new gear. It was an intellectual, was a cerebral approach to faith. The very meaning of the word Chabad is intellect. Chachma bin Adat is intellectual or wisdom or cerebral approach to faith. And that's what is represented by two different approaches of the Baal Shem Tov, whose approach was Emunah, faith, and the approach of the Alter Rebbe, whose approach was Chabad, which means logic. Now, the Rebbe points out that the arguments between the Talmudic sages as to when the first fruits were obligatory upon access to the land or upon conquest of the land is reflective of the two positions of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. You see, the Baal Shem Tov's approach to Judaism was he would travel from town to town, from hamlet to village. He would visit the ordinary Jews, and what would he do to them? He would ask them, "How are you?" And he would coax them to say, "Baruch Hashem," thank God, because he wanted them to simply acknowledge their Father in heaven. He wanted to encourage them to nurture a natural connection with God, to incorporate God into their ordinary lexicon, that they should be able to converse with God, even if they might not have been scholarly, right? He nurtured their faith, their basic, foundational, and fundamental faith, and that is the approach of the Baal Shem Tov, which parallels the approach of thanking God at the very onset, at the very beginning of your journey. I know nothing. I just woke up in the morning. All I know is that I'm on the right side of the grass. Nothing else, right? And for that alone, like Chuck says, I am ready to say thank you, Hashem, because it doesn't happen to everybody, right? Comes the other approaches, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe's approach is the founder of Chabad, and Chabad is about an intellectual attack on faith. Faith says you do it because that's how we do it. Chabad asks, but why? Explain it to me. Make it make sense. Shabbos, to fill in Shabbos candles, human suffering, theodicy, and all other issues in our faith need to be rationally understood. This is the foundation. This is the essence of what Chabad is all about. It's an intellectual approach to faith. That means I need to understand. Faith is not enough. I need it to make sense to me. And that's what needs a proper preparation to be able to reach such a state. You need to be learned. You need to be educated. You need to be able to meditate. You need to be able to know which questions to ask. Then you got to process the answers. And then you need to meditate upon the answers. And if you can go through those stages, which are Chachma Bina Das, conception, understanding, and meditation, feeling, that's when you're able to be Chabad, to be able to go through your journey. But that doesn't happen at the outset. That happens in the second opinion, which is to thank God, not when you wake up, but to thank God in prayer. See, prayer is a deep introspective journey. Prayer is not a recital in a foreign language at high speed. Prayer is not a lip service experience. It is a heart experience. It is an emotional experience. And I feel bad when I'm not able to make it here in the morning before the davening starts. I have several children at home that I need to, and a wife that I need to work my way through in order to get to show on time. So let me tell you, when I tell my children I need to go to shul, because davening is not just about catching up to the minyan. Davening, prayer, is an emotional experience, and you can't meditate at high speed. You just can't do it. My whole day is a different kind of day when I'm able to daven with the right emotional balance. When you read the words are portals into higher consciousness. These words need to be recited slowly with feeling. There was a chassid in Kfar Chabad where I studied in yeshiva. Kfar Chabad is a village near the airport in Israel. And we would go listen to him on a Friday night. He would sit there for hours. We were after our Friday night dinner meal. And he was sitting there, it's 10 p.m. at night, and he was sitting in the shul. It was dark, little lights. And I remember the way he would daven like this. He would go like this, he would say. He was completely oblivious to his surroundings. He was probably in his 80s. Kivo Yismach Libe Yano. And then he would go into a nigun. Ay, 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 ma. And then he would fall into meditation. Can you imagine how long it takes him to finish a sentence at this speed? It took him like 6 hours to do the evening service. Right. This is what prayer is about. Prayer is a meditative experience. You can't drive the train if you didn't put coal inside. You can't fly the airplane if it's not fueled up. You can't daven if you haven't studied and have what to meditate upon. That's what it's about. And that's the second opinion, which seems to be an arbitrary debate. Who cares if they brought the gratitude offering when they entered the land at first, or if they did it only after the 14 years of conquest? This debate is critically important to us. It represents two modalities to approach the divine service. Am I grateful to God by waking up and that's it, now going on to my day? Or am I conscious? Am I serving God with my brain and my heart throughout the day? Is it something that I'm able to pay gratitude for further and further as I deepen my awareness, as I stabilize my balance, as I grow higher in my awareness throughout the day? The lesson, of course, for us is that the attitude of gratitude is vital. It's important to be able to secure Hashem's blessings when we stand before God and we say, God, I know it was you. And I encourage you to do the following. The world, humanity tends to ask, why me? Only when bad things happen. You never hear somebody come into, Rabbi, I need to speak to you urgently now. Okay, what happened? I just got a job offering, and they're offering me 50 times higher salary than I got before. Why me? Nobody said that before. It's always when there's a crisis, when there's a catastrophe, when there's a problem. But the Torah portion of this week reminds us to cry out, why me? When good things happen, and then God won't need your attention. He won't need to get your attention. He won't need to bring you bad things in order to get your attention, because you're connected, you're conscious, and you're aware. May we all nurture this attitude of gratitude in our daily lives, not only as a historical study, but actually as a modern day daily reality. Yes, Jack.
Are we just waking up in the morning, or are we waking up the spark of God that's inside of us?
Are we just waking up in the morning, or are we waking up the spark of God inside of us? I think it's both. The spark of God is inside of you. The question is if you even know about it. How many of us even know that we have a spark of God inside of us? Otherwise, it's in a state of exile. Yes, it's in a state of exile. You have a person that says, I don't believe in God. Okay. So if you were to explain to this guy about the doctrine of perpetual creation, it's like a television telling me that he doesn't believe in electricity. It'll blow his mind. Exactly. Imagine the television is telling you he doesn't believe in electricity. Have you ever seen electricity? Has electricity ever come back? What does electricity look like? What color is electricity, right? Imagine the television is asking these questions. You can't even explain to him because he's just black and white. He's just so binary. He's just so shallow, right? When you get two babies in the womb and one says to the other, there is no mother. Have you ever seen mother? Has mother ever spoken to you? And you're like, dude, you're just a kid in utero. You don't get it. But imagine when the wave realizes that he's part of the ocean. That is enlightenment. That is waking up on a whole different level.